It's crossover time here on Locked On Boston College. On today's show, we'll be joined by JJ Jackson of Locked On Blue Devils, who's going to give us his perspective on a great season for Duke and look at this game from the Duke's perspective and from the BC perspective. It's going to be an interesting conversation, to say the least, something you're not going to want to miss. Make sure to check it out on today's Locked On Boston College.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another exciting crossover edition here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm JJ Jackson, the host of Locked On Blue Devils, and really excited to chat with AJ Black, who is the host of Locked On Boston College. Duke and Boston College going head-to-head on the gridiron on Friday night, and we've got an amazing breakdown for you here on the Locked On Podcast Network. AJ, what a fun one we've got here between two ACC teams that still have a couple of things up for grabs here this season in the month of November. I hope you're doing well, man, and it should be a whole lot of fun getting going here on the podcast today.
JJ, I'm looking forward to talking to you. I don't share the excitement about Friday's game, as the season has completely gone off the rails for BC.
It's kind of wild to see where we're at. So I figure we'll break it down. I want to ask you a couple of questions about Boston College, and then we'll take a quick timeout. You can reverse roles and ask me about Duke, and we'll see what happens there at the end. So with this Boston College team, I mean, big picture, you look at the record, just 2 wins so far for Boston College. If you were to just sum it up as quickly and as easily as you can, because I know it's so detailed what exactly's gone wrong, but what would just be the simple answer as to what's gone wrong for Boston College this season?
So it starts and ends with the offensive line. BC last year had 5 starters that returned from 2020, and they were really highly ranked, and these recruits, these players, and everyone thought of the world of them. Then 4 of them left for the NFL, and 1 blew his ACL out in the spring. So Jeff Hafley was stuck with 5 brand new offensive linemen for the offensive line, and he didn't get any experienced guys from the transfer portal. He he rolled the dice with the guys that he had, which is questionable, but that's his decision. That's kind of how he's built this program, and they were a disaster from day one. To be blunt, the first drive of the season, and Drew Kendall, their center, snaps the ball over Phil Dracovich's head. And then and you'd expect it to get better, but injuries continue to happen as 4 more offensive linemen are gone for the season. It's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster on that offensive line, and it's just bled into everything. And Duke fans are going to remember Phil Dracovich from 2 years ago, and his confidence is completely shattered. He may not even play Friday because it looked like he may have got a concussion or a shoulder injury against UConn. They can't run the ball. They are the worst running team in the country because of the offensive line, and then the defense is just asked to do too much. So it's been a nightmare of a season for BC.
What's gone right then? What's gone right for this team?
Honestly, nothing. If you were to ask me to name something, it's a good question to ask, but I was talking to a couple of our listeners, and they were like, ask Jeff Hafley where this team has improved since he's taken over. And I sat there and thought, special teams is a disaster right now. They had a punt for 15 yards. Zay Flowers dropped 2 punts on Saturday. They had a missed field goal. And then so that's an issue. The defense has been okay. It's not been great, but I wouldn't call it an asset. Other than they stay in the games as long as they can before teams end up blowing them out. So there really hasn't been. There really is no positive to this team. I'm not being like a negative Nancy here. It's just where things are right now. It hasn't been positive at all.
That's tough to hear for a Boston College team that going into the year, I think there were greater expectations for what they would be able to accomplish. You mentioned Jerkova coming back at that quarterback spot. Zay Flowers, I'll tell you too, AJ, that's a big name just across the ACC, the conference in itself. I think a lot of people are really excited about what he's able to do on the football field. I mean, is that the focal point of the offense these days, or from a Duke perspective, who should they be aware of on that Boston College offense on Friday's game?
Yeah, it's got to be Zay. Zay is how this offense lives and dies. And, you know, he leads the ACC, last I checked, he leads the ACC in all receiving yards and catches right now. It's because they look at him so much because he's so dynamic. He's fast. He can do a lot of, you know, they called him a dual threat wide receiver, basically, that he can do a lot underneath and he can do things deep. He runs great routes. He's got good quickness. He's going to be an NFL player. So, I mean, if you're looking for a positive, it was that. Again, he had a tough game against UConn, which was really hard to watch. But, you know, if you're going to look for one guy that could really rip things open, it's him. And then in terms of other targets on that team, it's been so rough. I guess someone like Jalen Gill, but they haven't been able to get them the ball. I mean, that's a big issue. It's like such a majority of the passes have been going right to Zay Flowers that, you know, you haven't really seen much of these other guys, and it's just been pretty one-dimensional on the way the offense is running.
Job security is something that everyone always wants to bring up in college football and college athletics. We're always curious about the coaching carousel and that sort of thing. So at this point in the season, kind of where does Jeff Hafley stand in terms of being the leader of that Boston College football program?
That's a great question because it's starting to simmer. You know, which is insane because a year ago you would have never thought Jeff Hafley would have been on the hot seat. But his inability to adjust, I think, has been kind of really eye-opening. And the fact that, your offensive line's real bad, but you can't figure out anything for offense. Like, they can't do anything. And that's on him. Like, he cannot, and, like, his struggles with, like, figuring out how, he knows nothing about the offense, and he's told the media this before. Like, it's a big thing for him to learn because he's a defensive backs coach. But as a head coach, you need to know that kind of stuff. And so the adjustments and things that happen throughout the game, it's been on him. And now you're starting to hear questions, right? So at the press conference this week, he was asked flat out, you know, how do you feel about your confidence about your job? And he had to answer it. And, you know, they're starting to, you know, there's questions to the AD about, you know, he got a vote of confidence, but what does that mean, right? If he goes out there and tanks the last 4 games, will he still have a vote of confidence at the end of this year? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think he'll get fired this year, but I think he's going to have one more season because I do understand the offensive line issues, but there's more to it than that. And there's been, you know, some questionable things that have been buzzing back behind the scenes too, in terms of locker room issues that are not. We don't know exactly what those are, but it seems like there's things going on. I think those are concerns as well.
A little bit of a different state for Duke football with Mike Elko in his first year on the job, and we'll talk a little bit more about this Duke squad here in just a moment. It's a Locked On crossover, Locked On Blue Devils and Locked On Boston College. Our show today is brought to you by SimpliSafe. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify that the threat is real so you can get priority police response. SimpliSafe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and out, smarter ways to detect motion that alert you only when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. 24/7 professional monitoring service costs less than $1 a day, less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system we recommend. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system at SimpliSafe.com/today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. SimpliSafe.com/LockedOnCollege. There's no safe like SimpliSafe.
All right, this is AJ Black from Locked On BC. I am now taking over the hosting duties here to talk with JJ Jackson of Locked On Blue Devils. And we just got through listening to me mope and grope about the BC football team, but on the other end of the ACC spectrum is the Duke Blue Devils, who are playing phenomenal football. I would say they're 5-3. They're playing very well, and it's all because of, it seems to me like the new culture brought up by Mike Elko. JJ, how you doing?
I'm super excited about this football team, AJ. So anytime the team's doing well, it puts me in a better mood. A 3-9 season for Duke a year ago. Look, David Cutcliffe had been the head coach for 14 years. He had many battles head-to-head with Boston College, and it was just time for a change. Getting up in age was David Cutcliffe, and again, after 14 seasons, sometimes a breath of fresh air can be nice. I certainly, to be honest, did not see this coming out of Duke this season. The Locked On Blue Devil listeners are well aware of the fact that I thought this team would win 4, maybe 5 games, and now all of a sudden Duke's already got that 5th win. They're 1 win shy of bowl eligibility. So it has been amazing to watch Duke football so far this year.
And now it seems like they've found their culture, and that is on the ground. You have Riley Leonard, the quarterback. He is a dual threat. Talk a little bit about this offense. It's putting up 32 points a game, which is, I think, incredible. Given it looks like they're up 12 points a game from the year before.
Yeah, it's wild to think about. And you mentioned the running game in particular. That has been such a bonus, too, for Duke. It's kind of been a stable of running backs, which is incredibly different than what we saw last season. While Duke did go 3-9 and was in a similar state as Boston College appears to be this year, the bright spot that you could jump to always last year was the play of running back Mateo Durant, who went on to set the single-season rushing record at Duke. No running back was more productive in 1 year ever than Mateo Durant was a year ago for the Duke Blue Devils. He's left. He graduated. He moved on to professional football, and so Duke had to find somebody to step up and replace him, and it wasn't just one person. It was a combination of backs, whether it be Jordan Waters or Jalen Coleman, Jarquez Moore coming in and making an impact, and then Riley Leonard, his play at quarterback. Not only has he thrown the ball effective, but his ability to run as well has been tremendous. Against Miami a few weeks ago, he runs in for 3 rushing scores, so the ability for multiple people to contribute on the offensive end has really helped this offense's identity. They do want to run the ball first and then spread the football out to their wide receivers second.
So BC's big issue, as I said in the first segment, was their offensive line. It seems like that's a big benefit of Duke. It's a big asset for them. Can you talk a little bit about that offensive line? Because that seems like that has been like the bread and butter for the Blue Devils.
No doubt at all. I'm glad you brought it up. That's a position group that never gets the praise when things are going right, and it's so quick to criticize when things aren't going so well. So that group has been outstanding. Mike Elko has really prided himself on tough physical football this season. It's hard to hear a coach say that if they've never been a head coach before, right? Mike Elko's traditionally been a defensive coordinator at all of his stops, and so he says he wants to run the football. Well, you got to wait and see if that's actually been the case, and it has been. And it's been the play of guys up front like Jacob Monk, who's done a tremendous job opening up holes for these running backs, having Riley Leonard have enough time to make decisions. We're not too far removed from 4 different quarterbacks in 4 different seasons for Duke football, leading the conference, it felt like, every single season in turnovers. 2 years ago in that 2020 season, Chase Bryce, the Clemson transfer, who's now playing good football at Appalachian State, was the Duke quarterback, and he led the entire country in fumbles and in turnovers alone. So the fact that the offensive line has protected the quarterback has opened up so many different avenues of offensive success for the Duke football team. So thanks again for bringing up that offensive line, because I certainly don't talk about them enough, and we probably should.
Well, as a host of a program that has absolutely no offensive line, I think our fans are just jealous. Just want to hear about it. So anyways, speaking of that, let's go to the defensive side of the ball. And I was looking at pressure, and it looks like Duke is a very good team in terms of getting after the quarterback, which is a bad omen for a BC team that has struggled to keep Phil Dracovic or Emmett Moorhead upright. Tell me a little bit about this defense, how that defensive line looks like. It looks like they have a bunch of guys with multiple sacks, and what Elko, who's I know a defensive-minded coach, like athlete, what he's brought to that defense.
Dude, so many guys love to get after the quarterback when you're talking about this Duke defensive front. And it starts with Dwayne Carter, who's one of the captains of the defense on the interior. He's going to be number 90 on your television screens when you're watching Duke football take on Boston College on Friday night. He has been amazing. R.J. Oben has been a really bright spot. Jamion Franklin has done good things on that defensive line as well. And then Shaka Hayward in the linebacker spot, the leading tackler on Duke's squad last year, the only player on this Duke team, period, that got any sort of all ACC buzz before the season started. Shaka Hayward is the leader of that unit, and Duke took on Miami their last time out before this bye week that they had. And AJ, I don't know if Boston College fans paid too much attention to Duke football, but they actually forced 8 turnovers against the Hurricanes, which was the most in a Power 5 game of any 2 Power 5 teams in college football since 2009. So over a decade's worth of evidence, and Duke was able to walk away forcing 8 turnovers defensively. It sets your team up for success. And so, yeah, this Duke team has been really good at forcing turnovers, and that should be something that should worry Boston College a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, kind of just talking about Duke, you're looking at your season, and you have to rate this a resounding success so far, correct?
Oh, 100%.
Okay, yeah, and you move on from a legendary coach, and I call David Cutcliffe legendary because of what
I would as well, yeah.
Right, to bring in a guy like Elko, who I think BC fans may not remember. He was a name that was buzzed around at least for I know when Hafley was hired, he was one name that they were looking at. And I believe when Steve Adazio was hired in 2012, he was another name that they were looking at. So he's a guy that BC had their chances at and they did not go after. And you're seeing the results here at Duke. You're seeing a team that's 5-3. They're feeling good. They found their identity quick, and that's impressive. And in our final segment, JJ and I are going to go over our thoughts on the game, give our predictions, and talk everything else that you're going to want to know about Friday night game between the Eagles and the Blue Devils. Now, if you're like me, sweat is not a fun thing. If you go out and you wear a nice button-down shirt, a nice dress shirt, and it's hot, or you're out there and you're getting nervous and you sweat, it's the worst thing that can happen. Those pit stains that you get sometimes are so embarrassing. It makes you look, unprofessional, and it does not do you any justice. This is why SweatBlock is the place to go. SweatBlock gives you the confidence to wear what you want without embarrassing underarm stains. They have the SweatBlock wipes. They're a must-have for everyone's toiletry bag. Whether it's a big presentation or a hot date, everyone can benefit. Basically, you use it. It's going to prevent you from sweating. It's going to get rid of those stains. It's a perfect thing and a must-have for guys like me. So if you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweater odor, try SweatBlock. Save 20% with promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com. Also available on Amazon.
Find a few moments here on today's Locked On crossover episode. It's Locked On Blue Devils and Locked On Boston College. I'm JJ Jackson, representing the Duke side of things. AJ Black joins me representing BC as we take a look at this game between Duke and Boston College, set for Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You can watch the game on ESPN2. It's going to be a lot of fun. And AJ, you talk about these two teams meeting on the gridiron. They've only met 8 times ever. Boston College holds that series edge 5-3. Boston College winning the last time out in 2020. You have to go all the way back to 2015 to find the last time that Duke won. I guess here I just wanted to make a point that when we see this new scheduling model kick in for the ACC, I'm looking forward to getting to play more conference opponents more frequently. And with Boston College being one of the newer squads joining the ACC several years ago, I'm just looking forward to seeing more Duke and Boston College football games in the years to come.
Absolutely. I thought and I know it was because of COVID, and that's a situation in itself, but having that schedule was like fun and unique. It was like BC they got to play Duke and Georgia Tech and Virginia. They didn't play Wake Forest. They didn't play NC State. They got Pitt. They got a whole different schedule, and to play against different teams more frequently, it keeps things fresh. Even though the freshness is mostly on those out of conference schedules,
right?
getting Duke on there as well and getting teams that you don't play instead of having to wait 8 or 9 years to play. It's a better thing, and I think it's going to produce a better product for fans out there.
I'm looking forward to more of these matchups to come, and certainly looking forward to Friday night's game as well between these two teams. Again, you look at this squad for Duke, a 5-3 year so far. Boston College, a 2-6 overall record. What's at stake for both of these teams from the Duke perspective? Duke's 1 win shy of bowl eligibility, and who would have thought they would be here in year 1 of the Mike Elko era? Of the games left remaining on Duke's schedule, Boston College is the one that the Blue Devils should feel best about. They've got games against Virginia Tech, Pitt, and Wake Forest to follow. So for Duke to be bowl eligible in year 1 of Mike Elko, that is the biggest thing at stake in this matchup against Boston College. How would you answer that question from the Eagles' perspective, AJ?
I mean, for Boston College, they just need to figure something out, right? They just had probably one of the worst losses in program history, losing to UConn, a team that they've never lost before. The season's not over. There's chances for this team to grow. There's chances for this team to find some momentum and figure some things out. And every week that they don't do that is a wasted opportunity. So, go out there, show some pride. It's a night game at Alumni Stadium where BC has had some fun games in the past. Go out there, play, as Jeff Hafley says, play fearless. That's his thing, and I know fans are mocking that a lot lately. But, go out there and just do it. And if BC can go out there and grab a win, that's great because no one's expecting them to win another game this season. So, just go out there and see what you got and get if you get a chance to get some of the younger kids out there to get some experience, this is the place to do it. You see what you got, see what you can do for next year, and I think that's what BC fans should be looking for.
I really like Duke's chances to win this football game. I think they are going to become bowl eligible come Friday night with a victory over Boston College. 31 is the number that's sticking in my head for whatever reason, so I'm going to kind of go with that. I see this playing out to be a 31-17, 31-21 type ball game in favor of Duke. So, AJ, how do you see this game playing out?
Yeah, I got Duke winning big. And BC scored 17 points over the last 3 games, and I know one of the games was against Clemson, so that's kind of tough. But scoring just 7 against, I think it was 7 against Wake Forest or 14 against Wake Forest, 3 against UConn. It's just been a nightmare. And I look at Duke as a team that's not going to shoot themselves in the foot. Last week against UConn let BC try to get back into that game as much as they could. They had 9 false start penalties, and BC still couldn't take advantage of that. And I don't see Duke doing something like that. I think Duke is a much more prepared and well-prepared and ready team to do something. And if they get those opportunities, if BC's offensive line can't hold, I think this game could get, I don't want to say out of control, but I'm going to have Duke winning by 17 to 21 points.
All right, awesome stuff. We'll see how the game plays out. Again, Friday night, ESPN2, 7 p.m. Eastern kickoff between Duke and Boston College. Make sure you're paying attention to it. It's been really fun to do this crossover edition here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find both of these shows. You know that already as you're listening to it. Make sure you subscribe. We're on YouTube every day as well. Subscribe there for all of the best content. And then AJ and I also have the added bonus, the added pleasure of teaming up with Candace Cooper there at Locked On ACC, joining her each and every week. So make sure you check out the Locked On ACC podcast as well. AJ, this has been so much fun, man. It should be a fun game between Duke and Boston College. And who knows, once basketball season rolls around, we might have to do another one of these things.
I was just going to say, I would rather have a bet of what game will be closer, BC football against Duke football or BC basketball. I got a good feeling about BC basketball this year. I think it's going to be a fun team. So check out any basketball talk on my show, too, because we're starting to get excited about Earl Grant and that team coming up this year.
Can't wait to see how all that plays out. It's been a whole lot of fun. You've been listening to a Locked On crossover episode of Locked On Blue Devils and Locked On Boston College.